the more parties you get investing in your deal, the less of a chance, and like they're actually interested and you're being honest and transparent with them, the less a chance you're going to buy a bad deal. And if you buy a bad deal, oh my God, it's like horrendous, because it's not people think it's going to be like a quick bankruptcy and you're dead. It's going to be like a 5-year death spiral.
Welcome to the Before You Buy or Sell a Business podcast, where we help buyers and sellers learn more about the acquisition process, discuss recent transactions, and stay up to date on the latest news in the market. Here's your host, Garrett Johnson.
Let's get into the actual business. So when you first came to me, you were under contract. Sounds like you kind of tried to keep several balls in the air at the same time, which isn't always a bad idea. You had a deal that we ended up working on, got into it, got a little ways down, and you kind of decided there was something else that was a little bit better for you. So the one that you ended up with, maybe tell me how you found that and what you liked about it.
Yeah, no, so we found it pretty much traditional route, just searching and eventually getting it under LOI. The one we ended up with, HVAC. Pick up and go on Instagram and everyone loves HVAC right now. So industry checked out. The fundamentals of it were very interesting. I joke that like we got pretty much the most classic search deal that you could possibly get, in the sense that it's in a very small town in Nebraska. Wonderful people here, honestly, like super nice, but it is like 5,000 people here, 7,000 people here. So
7,002.
I had time to count them.
Yeah, Garrett counted on the weekend.
Yeah. He probably cold called them all.
Yeah. And it was just like, not only industry, not only like, again, those 5 criterias fit, but like when you looked at it on a market and local level, it's like these guys practically have an oligopoly here. Like we are the only commercial and residential. There's a few other small players, but like major one within a 50-mile radius. Long-serving customers. The company's 100 years old. So
wow,
and that's the thing too that is interesting when you look at this. It's like you think of like industry and companies on a macro level, but you really do have to double click on like the town. Like where is it? And who are the competitors? And it really is that nuanced when you get down in deep detail in due diligence. But sorry, cut it off. So
yeah, I think just to jump on some of the other deals that we were working on is just that experience was, and we had some advisors that were kind of giving us a little bit of guidance here too, which was helpful. But one of the things that we talked about at the beginning of this process is that a deal is going to become more complicated as you go on. I remember we looked at a few that had like an environmental. I think we looked at a tire shop and like
California.
Yeah, and they also were insisting that we go out there before we signed any contract, like before anything, and we were like, let's do it. And then we were like, well, maybe this is a lot of work before we just signed something. But the point is that there was some environmental issue that we're going to have to work with. There's maybe a real estate aspect. There was just a lot of complicated. And as we were discussing this, like you just have to realize that if it's not complicated at the beginning, it's going to get worse at the end. And when we had a few deals, one of the things was the networking capital was maybe something we can talk about in a second, but you just assume it's going to get harder. So you really need to start with a very simple thesis. From our perspective, I think you need to start with, on your debt kind of service coverage ratio and what you're comfortable with, you need to be a little bit more conservative, because more likely than not, the financials are going to tighten, whether it be what they ask, whether it be how much networking capital, whether it be what the last 12 months are looking like. It's probably not. It's going to be a little worse than what you think it's going to be. And so I was very glad that we had kind of multiple things that we were trying to do, because at the end, a few other deals got very, very tight at the end. It was just like, this is not going to, or there's a kind of a contention with, the seller just on one point, like one was the networking capital. And so you just have to realize that, I think we even looked at a funnel. Like you have to look at so many deals to get under LOI. Obviously, it's all made up, but it's just to get an idea. And then so many LOIs, you're going to get kind of the end. But for us, we probably looked at, let's say, 500 deals, and then we got, say, 10 or 15 under LOI, and we got 3 or 4 pretty close, and only 1 came out. So you just don't want to put all your eggs in one basket if you don't have to.
Yeah, and it is a little hard on your conscience sometimes, like having multiple LOIs going. But then again, I mean, you have to really be honest and real with yourself. Like, even though you have something under LOI, and even though like the seller said they read it, they can at any point be like, yeah, actually, I don't want to do this. And then you're like, you signed it. And they go, no. And then you're like, okay, I guess we're moving forward or not. Like it just happens like that. I kid you not, like a call. And so there's a uncontrollable nature of it, that it doesn't matter how much you explain, how much you outline perfectly clear. They're humans, and humans will change their minds all the time. And their perspective of fair is very different from your perspective of fair. So yeah.
Yeah, that's the hardest part during the transaction is trying to get both sides to feel like they're getting a fair deal. Because if it gets off, then that side is going to be drastically, more upset and harder to deal with. And I've noticed that over the years, that if both parties feel like they're getting what they want out of it, or getting a good deal, then they're a lot easier to work together. Whereas if one side feels like they're getting taken advantage of, forget it. Like it's over. So
one of the best conversations I have with sellers is whenever I put a deal, you call them and be like, are you happy? Even if they sign it, be like, are you actually happy? Like, are you excited about this? Like, do you feel good? And if they're like, actually, like, I feel like I'm being squeezed, then you're like, we need to talk.
Yeah.
Because if you feel that right at the start, it's just going to get worse over time. Yeah.
Wow. Great advice. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. So you got this one under LOI. When you saw the listing, or however you saw the sim and decided it was something you wanted, did you negotiate much off the purchase price? And then Garrett, definitely let's talk about net working capital. And I think before we talk about net working capital, I think it's very important for people to understand that historically, working capital was typically not left in a deal. So when we were talking earlier about, the types of businesses that we used to finance, 10 plus years ago, nobody ever talked about working capital. It was like pulling teeth to get the bank to include working capital. It was just expected that the buyer would have cash reserves personally that they'd be willing to pump into the deal. And after years and years and years of kind of fighting with credit and explaining to them, like, we need to stop setting them up to fail and set them up for success, we finally have gotten to a point now where working capital is usually not even a question. Sometimes I'm even saying, hey, that might be a little too much, but again, you want to have working capital. So what we've seen happen over the years is that people like you that have worked in some kind of, other industry, maybe been involved in some larger M&A transactions, understand that net working capital is absolutely always a part of the deal. So when you bring that, kind of knowledge and philosophy down to, let's just call it like lower middle market or even small business, and you start applying that, there's a lot of resistance, because you have these brokers that for 40 years have been a business broker and have never seen someone talk about net working capital. They tell the seller, guess what? We're going to get you a 4 times multiple on your EBITDA that I made up. And then we're also going to let you keep all the accounts receivable, the inventory, the cash, everything. You're going to keep your truck that you shouldn't be running through the business, all these things. And then you have people that are more educated and that understand how it works coming in and saying, nope, we need to leave some working capital. I want to be set up. So, that, I think understanding that side of it for people like makes things a little bit easier when they're trying to negotiate and they're trying to get what they want out of it. But I would love for you to kind of talk about how you negotiated, and then maybe some of the struggles that you had with the net working capital, and then kind of how you came up with what you guys used as your calculation as well.
Yeah, there's a lot there. On the
Sorry.
simplified version. So on all the deals, we had to negotiate, I would say, on everything. And it was usually once we got the QOV. And the QOV could be the financials were different or better. But usually by the time, it wasn't just the financials, we learned more about the business. So the one that we acquired, for example, the commercial mix was higher. So it was a bit more project-based than we thought. So, there was a little bit of risk that comes with it. And some of the other businesses that we were looking at, maybe we just looked at some of their financials. It was kind of trending down at that point. And so you just had to hedge, or it was a bit lower. And then Obviously, anytime you're asking for more protections in the structure or a lower price, or, hey, there was one where they were like, sure, this person who's been running the business for 20 years is going to leave, but there's a new person that's going to take over. And you're like, well, actually, that person, the more we learn, is one running the business almost. Like, that person should stay. And so their salary should stay. So we're going to have to lower the price. So this is like, there's always that. There's probably 3 or 4 times after the LOI where it's going to die. It's like the first, the QB, and then it's going to be some qualitative issues. Then it was going to be the networking capital, which we can talk about in a second. And then it's just going to be all the fine details. But you just know, there's going to be, it's going to die, maybe come back, or it just dies. So there was always that. That was pretty stressful, to be honest. Because like what Pete said, like we wanted them to feel, but there was a real imbalance between our perspective as a buyer. And because when you look at a business with all these criteria that we think are super clear, they're not thinking about that. All they're thinking is, I made this much money. I've been making this much money. It's going to continue to make. I don't care what kind of revenue it is. Like, stop talking to me about revenue type. Who cares? Like, what is this? What's your deal? Like,
well, they're not business people typically, right? They're usually tradesmen, and that's fine. But
my checks are big. You want a whole bunch of small checks? I don't care. Like, you're still getting checks. Why you stop talking to me about commercial, like project-based revenue, and do some ratio? It's just like, so you just have to realize sellers they built a business from a certain skill set, and you look at it very different as a buyer. And there has to be I would say the relationship with the broker is pretty important. On the networking capital side, I think what we realize, so when you're doing this negotiation, you don't want to negotiate everything up front, right? Like, you don't want to, if you're dating someone, you're not going to be like, well, by the way, I don't want any dogs in the house, and I expect you to do this, and then also I want a cabin here, but I'm not doing beach houses. Like, you don't start there, right? Like, you kind of realize you build a relationship, and then you do it progressively. But there's an art to it. So there was a few times where we'd say, hey, we'd always be in the LOI, networking capital is included. Everyone's like, sure. That sounds totally reasonable.
Don't even know what it is, but sure.
Yeah, they have no idea. And then we kind of learned that they had no idea what that meant. And then when you get to the numbers, they're like, absolutely not. And then there'd be some points where we'd be like, okay, let's ask the broker this time. Broker, do you understand? Let me walk you through it. He's like, yeah, totally understand.
Yeah, 100%.
I've spoken to the seller.
He loves
spoken
it.
to the seller. The seller totally gets it. Seller sees the numbers, like, what on earth is this?
Like, I have to leave money in the business that I worked for.
Yeah.
And that literally, and it's across all sellers. Like, you hear that. Like, what do you mean I have to give you money that I did the work for?
Which is fair.
Which is fair. Like,
and
partially, but there's also times where you're in the middle of a job, or you haven't completed that job and you took a deposit. And it's like, that's where I feel like the sellers, I'm like, you guys, you took money from this customer, or you've taken money from this customer, and sometimes you've kind of overcharged them and you haven't delivered yet, and then you're expecting to keep that. Like, so they're going to take over the business, and then they're immediately going to have to do all this work and not receive any revenue, and you expect them to just be fine. Like, do you want them to pay back your seller note? Yeah. Like, and then they're kind of like, oh, okay. So yeah.
No, and that's very true. Like, I will be very humble and say that I didn't fully I knew it by paper what networking capital was before, but until you're running a business, you don't feel it. And like, on day one, we felt it. And it was great that we actually negotiated it, because like, you're like, yeah, these bills are coming. I have to pay for it. You need cash going to the door. And like, the most depressing thing you can have in a small business is to see your bank account go down. And like, you don't want that. You just want it to always be steadily going up. And when you get the right number, it should happen. And that happened to us, which we were very happy about. But yeah, in the process of figuring it out, it's very painful. Like, I would say, just out of advice, like, when you do your QV, trust the QV guy. If he says this is the networking capital target, just trust it. Like, just be like, okay, and present it, fight your tooth and nail for it. And then you can get into like more of the nuances. And that's what kind of happened to us near the end. Like, we had a number, and we actually got that number. There was a bit of like back and forth on it. But once we got it, and then this is what really, I think, made a difference. Like, when we were kind of figuring out how much cash we wanted to keep on the balance sheet. That's when it takes like, okay, have a very long conversation with the seller, like day to day, what does the cash flow look like, and put it in very like operator terms. And that's where I think the little secret sauce we discovered when that was in there was like how he pays suppliers. Because if you look at him like on an Excel sheet, it looks like, yeah, you need a lot of money, but like he will not typically pay his suppliers until he receive money from his customers a lot of the times. Versus very large jobs, there's like a 2-week kind of delay, but most of the time, like you will hold the bill until you receive the cash from the customer, which, you know, changes things a little bit on networking capital. But yeah, no, I would say generally, unless you're going a really nuanced thing, which you should not do early on in a deal, just trust the QB guy and just fight tooth and nail for it, but be kind, be open, try to explain it the best you can. And you're right, yeah, too. I mean, like, there is this weird gray area that you'll never know until you start operating. It's like, okay, yes, we have this job that we're doing. How much work have you actually done on the job and you've received cash for it? Because like, until you're an HVAC operator, you have no idea how long it takes to put in a chiller. You know, it can be a very massive chiller. Like you say, oh yeah, I'm like 50% done. Like you won't know until you're there and you see the guys go out do it and like actually sign hours to it.
Yeah, I've been seeing that a lot lately. And then I'll see a lot of people that are like, they've got $10 million in backlog. And I'm like, is it profitable? And then they're like, stop. They're like, oh. And I'm like, yeah, because who cares? Like, they say they have the backlog, but have you checked what the margin is on that? Do you even know what their margin is? Do you understand what the costs are? Like, you likely don't. So someone can be sitting there telling you, I've got all this backlog, and you're really excited about it. But then you get in, you take over, and every single one of those jobs was underbid on purpose to try to make it look like they had a large backlog, or someone bid it wrong, and you literally take over the business, and then you've got all these jobs that you have to complete that you're losing money on, and then you're done. And so, yeah, it's a lot to think about. And there's a lot of people that I feel like don't really do their due diligence, or they're kind of like rushing through it because they've got this broker and seller screaming at them, you got to close, you got to close, you got to close. Yeah. And they're not saying, slow down. Let me make sure what I'm getting myself into is really what I want to get myself into. So I'm glad you guys did that. I know we did move quickly on the deal, but I think because you had already been working on it and you'd already done, and at that point, like you mentioned before, you'd gone through so many reps now that you kind of understood a lot quicker what you're looking for than somebody from the very beginning. Like if you would have grabbed that deal from the very beginning and tried to, just take that one and close, it probably would have taken you another 90 days or something to really kind of wrap your brain around it. So
yeah, no, and like one thing that I will say, like, so I did work as an HVAC engineer for like pretty briefly in like early 20s. I worked mostly in mining, oil and gas, but like still on large projects. So I will say there is an element of industry experience that when our seller was explaining it to us, it made sense to me. Like, it was like, I've heard this before, which gave me confidence that he's doing this right. And he's not just like you said, because that's very scary. Like, you can win as many bids or work as you want if your profit margin is 1%. But like how he was explaining it and how he does it was like, oh, that is exactly how I remembered my project manager or all these guys talking about it in the past. Like he's using the same terminology. He's using, the same methods to do this. So that gave me a lot of confidence that there wasn't many traps there. But yeah, you never know it's there because there's a joke that our seller, he makes fun of us all the time about making spreadsheets. Because he literally just writes things down on a piece of paper. Like, and you can't get this information from him. Like it's literally just in a piece of paper on his desk. It's a lot of the times like, yeah, it's really tough to do due diligence on, this day-to-day operation.
Because you can't get in his brain and understand where. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I ask people, like, well, what do you use for, to manage this? And, oh, it's in my head. And I'm like, but it really is. And they like completely understand it. But then you're like, okay, that doesn't work. Like, we need to put it down on paper. We need to put systems in place. So, yeah, it's interesting. So, all right. So you ended up, it was about 3.7 times multiple, which, is kind of fair, very in line with what I'm seeing. Recently he had about a 20% seller carry note. We built in $400,000 in working capital to kind of help not only with the net working capital, but then anything that kind of comes up in the first, couple months or couple weeks, and you guys put down a little bit under 5%. So ended up being a really good deal. Cash flow worked. So how did it go once you closed? Or if you want to talk anything about any advice with the SBA process, which I recognize could be a full 2-hour conversation, but if you want to maybe bring anything up on the structure or anything like that, otherwise we could get into kind of how the business went with the transition.
In terms of the structure, I also during the process, I found too that you just want to win initially, and you don't understand the total impact of bidding too high, because those debt payments are coming. It's either you're gonna have to raise a lot of equity and pay back a lot of pref, or those debt payments are coming. So putting in fair bids takes a lot of discipline, and you just have to have faith that they like you as a person. And that's where I was saying it's more of a sales game, that like they're gonna want to sell to you, versus like get a higher multiple and sell to someone they don't like. And that's a great sign too in terms of business. That means they really care about who's going to be operating it next. So getting that fair multiple is something that you just have to be completely stoic about it. Like pick up Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, read it every night, and just be like, it's going to be okay. I'm just going to go bid what is fair. And then on the structure, seller notes are incredibly important. It helps with the lending side. It gives faith to the lenders. If you can get standbys in there, like a 2-year standby, incredibly helpful. Some element of forgivable note, incredibly helpful, because it just gives you confidence to yourself too, not only on a cash flow perspective, because like if you model it out, you expect to grow, and like this should be a non-issue. So like the forgivable note is like, you don't even want to be able to question exercising it, but like it gives you confidence that the seller is like, it's a great business. Like, sure, you want to throw this in, whatever. It's like, you're going to hit that. I mean, Jared, you were amazing to work with, which I really appreciated. It's a painful process getting through the underwriter and all the documents that you guys need. But what I found useful about it as well was the fact that I learned more about the deal going through with a lender as well. Like it's think of it as free due diligence. And it's like a safety net for yourself, and be totally honest with them, because like the more parties you get investing in your deal, the less of a chance, and like they're actually interested and you're being honest and transparent with them, the less a chance you're going to buy a bad deal. And if you buy a bad deal, oh my God, it's like horrendous, because it's not people think it's going to be like a quick bankruptcy in your debt. It's going to be like a 5-year death spiral that's going to take forever to lead there, and it'll destroy your mental health, your physical health. Hopefully not, but like it's a protection mechanism. So and like your lenders are not your enemies. They're your friends. Try to build friendship with them and try to build trust with them, and don't be afraid to share with them bad news.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I always tell people like, we're going to find it. So just tell me what's going on. It's a lot easier. And the last thing we want is for you to fail, right? I mean, we absolutely want you to be successful. And sometimes we're even kind of going through the process with you, explaining to you, hey, I've done this, 70 times a year. Like I can tell you, like, these are the things that people are calling me 6 months later and saying they're struggling with. Like, let's try to attack it now. And so, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is you did have some investors. I would call them more strategic. And I feel like that's something that should be addressed as well. We get a lot of people that are saying, I want to put in, a small percentage. I'm going to raise some capital. I usually ask them like, where's that coming from? If they tell me like, oh, it's my cousin or whatever, like, okay, great. Like, they're not just handing you money. But when we get somebody that says like, oh, I'm working with such and such group, I'm like, okay, I know them. I know what they bring to the table. I know that they're going to make an investment, and they're not going to just call you every 2 years and say, hey, can I get a distribution? They're going to try to help you as much as they can. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit if you'd like to, and then maybe some advice for people who are trying to raise money.
Yeah, so we worked with Search Investment Group, and my advisor was Jordan Carter. And I'll give them a shout out. They're really great guys. If you ever want to work with them, I highly recommend reaching out to them. Like, they were incredibly helpful. They gave me the confidence too, because not only did, like, when I was thinking about going to search, I actually listened to a podcast with Robert, who's also a search investment group partner. And I just liked what they were saying. I had a feeling we'd vibe well with them. So I just reached out to them about their program if they'd back us. They put us through the same process they put most searchers. They vetted us. And then we got a contract with them, which essentially is they taught us the basic fundamentals of search, and they would review a lot of deals with us, and they just help us get through this dark, murky forest of search. They were our guides. And that gave me a lot of confidence too that, yeah, hopefully I'm not going to buy a bad deal. Yeah, it's funny when I would get frustrated at the start because the amount of times that I'd bring them a deal, they'd be like, oh, it's a terrible deal. What are you doing? And you get frustrated because you're struggling, you're trying your best, but in the end, it's they just want you to not get in trouble. And it does go a long way when you have someone like that in your court, when you go and approach a lender like yourself and saying hey, Search Investment Group has done a lot of great deals. They're probably going to continue doing great deals into the future. But yeah, no, we saw a lot of market confidence in us after that. Just having somebody with some sort of name back you. Now, granted, a lot of people have been successful without that, but I found that incredibly helpful during the process.
Yeah, that's kind of how we've seen it as well. Is anybody that's working with somebody that's kind of done it before, that's investing, they're wanting to protect their investment, right? So we're a lot less nervous that, if you guys hit some bumps in the road, they're just going to come right in and go, hey, we'll help you out. We can get through this. We've done it before. So it's definitely, something you want to look into. So, all right. So we closed, you took over the business. Maybe give me kind of a high level view of how that went and how it's going. And we'll kind of get through that part quickly because we're, taking up your time as running a business.
So yeah, no, it was incredibly scary. Leading up to the close, you kind of start, your demons start coming out and you're like, did you check this? Did you check this? And then you kind of have to have a little bit of faith that no, I checked it. It's going to be fine. And then you just kind of have to throw yourself into the deep end a little bit. One of the most interesting stories I have was when we were signing the deal at the law office. I thought it would be champagne, bow, ooh, we did it, everyone. But it was actually very bittersweet. The sellers were crying. And that's probably one of the best signs that you could ever have when you buy a business is oh wow, this was actually a big part of them. And it's they're losing their child in a way. So that gave me a lot of faith, or us a lot of faith. I was okay, this is it's a good business. And then it was tough. And then, the day of, a lot of employees really liked them. And then a lot of employees, they were shocked, and then they were questioning their future and they're getting scared. So the first 2 weeks were us just reassuring, taking each technician out for lunch, telling them it's gonna be okay, showing them, like you said, we're nice guys, we care about you, we care about the future, we're fun, we want to make this a great experience, and we hope this, is exciting for you. One of the things that did shock me though, asset purchases. Now that is a beast that you need to mentally prepare for. It's great, everyone knows, liability side, you're clear in a way, but my God, going to set up every bank account, phone thing, you need new accounts across the board for everything. And that took 2 to 3 weeks just to do, getting it set up. It was literally just paperwork after paperwork after paperwork sending it up. And what was painful too is even just getting credit cards, because you have a new LLC. So they're oh, you have a new business. This is a brand new business. We're not going to give you a big credit card. And you're no. But this is a 100-year-old business. They're all right, show me your LLC.
They don't get it. Yeah.
They don't get it. They're what do you mean? It's no. So you kind of have to be creative there. You kind of have to push through it. And yeah, it's exhausting because you go through due diligence and the close process, which you're already exhausted from. And then you have this 2-week sprint afterwards, a 3-week sprint of just pure paperwork, the similar closing a deal. So it's not when the deal closes, you get to relax and now you're an operator. It's no, it gets harder. And then on top of that, you're learning the industry, how things work. You kind of have to, at one point, step away from the admin side and just be like, spend time with the seller, because TikTok, their time is going down with you, like learning the business. And that's why I really recommend people doing a partner search. Like, we would take turns. Like, I was purely doing admin, he would be with the seller, or I'd be with the seller doing pure admin. Because I personally couldn't imagine doing this by myself. And yeah, you're just incredibly uncomfortable for about like 2 to 3 months. I would say Garrett and I at this point, we're about July 29th. So we're coming to like 3.5 months in. Yeah. We're finally like over the hump, and we're starting to like feel comfortable that things are going to be okay. And that's, I think it's once you get through like you said, networking capital, like a full cycle, like you start receiving a lot of your own cap. That sort of make you start, feeling better. You start, getting a little bit back into your hobbies, like going to the gym. And it's a painful process, but it's also been incredibly rewarding. Like I can't imagine doing anything else right now, and I find it incredibly enjoyable, and I think it's incredibly fun if you let it be. Yeah.
Well, and then hopefully your soon-to-be in-laws now understand what you did, right? Yeah. So
it was when I was back home, it was such a good feeling that like when their friends came over and they asked like what I did, I was like, I own an HVAC company. Like, not like saying like, big man, I own an HVAC company, but just having something tangible that like I didn't have to over explain. Like, no, it's just, it's trend, it's ETA, like you can get an SBA loan. Like they just, the more you talk about it, the more crazy and like fake it sounds. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Like, I'm HVAC, done. Like, conversation over. Like,
yeah, until they want to ask for help for their own air conditioning. You're gonna start getting that now. So cool. Exactly. I mean, this has been amazing. I really appreciate your time. I'm sure, we'll have maybe a follow-up again or something in a couple months, or if you guys end up trying to add another one or something, it'll be awesome. But so I always ask 2 questions at the end. So maybe we can get Garrett another time, but I know how it is being a life business owner. So first one is, do you have a mentor, or did you ever have a mentor?
Yes. My uncle, Bruce, who I mentioned earlier, he's been kind of our mentor through the process, incredibly helpful. And along the way too, mostly kind of old family friends who, when you're a kid, you didn't realize how like great they were at business. They were just like your parents' friends. But I mean, they care deeply about myself. I'm just talking about Garrett's had mentors as well. But having actually reached out to them again and chat with them about it, it's because they will reveal your blind spots because they actually care about you. And that's what I found incredibly helpful through the process.
Cool. All right. Final question. What motivates you?
Oh, adventure. It's key. It's the only thing that's me going. I'm trying to get better at prioritizing like at least somewhat of a sense of safety and security. But like, I think it's not because I want to do incredible big things. It's just, I just find it interesting, and I just want to like push myself, go out there, and it's kind of dorky. I'll do it again. Like, go to the frontier, like put yourself out there, like, look back at a life that, you could tell stories about and stuff like that. So that's what excites me. It's funny. It's when like a lot of the drama, when drama does arise at the office, it's like, if you have a perspective that this is an adventure and it's fun, and like every story you read has their ups and downs, and like, you're like, oh, this is one of those downs. Like, this is cool. This is an exciting part of the story. Then you'll get through it much, much better, in my opinion.
That's a great perspective and great outlook. And I appreciate you sharing this adventure with us. And if I can do anything to help you guys out in the future, let me know. I really appreciate your time. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jared. And I look forward to working with you and many deals in the future.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Thank you for listening. We hope you found this podcast informative and helpful. please don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. For more information, or if you'd like to discuss a transaction, please go to www.jarrettwjohnson.com.